I have been working on this video for a while now, and the problem is I have had to refilm it multiple times because I can't make up my mind on whether or not I wanted to have a project for 2025. I have finally decided that I do want a project for 2025. Let's talk about why I didn't want to do one before I tell you who it is. Or you can just skip ahead, whatever. I didn't want to do a 2025 project because the 2024 project was great, but it tied up 25% of my reading for the entire year. And last year was the most reading I've ever done in a year. So any other year, it would have been half of my reading for the entire year. And I was worried that I might revert back this year or just something ridiculous like that. I don't think I'm going to, but I also realized I didn't want to tie up so much of my time. And so for all of January, I was stressing out over whether or not I was going to have a project. Did the same thing for 2 or 3 weeks of February. And then I realized I needed a project, and I realized that I needed Lois McMaster Bujold as my project for the year. And the reason I say that is because I've read 7 of her Penrick and Desdemona books so far this year, and it is now one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. So I want to go into everything about Lois McMaster Bujold that kind of matters. I just want to talk about a little background for her, and then what makes her writing so special, why I chose her, and what she has written. So let's get into it. Lois McMaster Bujold has been writing since the mid 80s. I think she wrote before that, but she didn't get published until then. She is known primarily for the Vorkosigan series, and it is a space opera series that for most of the series follows Miles Vorkosigan. I have only read Shards of Honor, which is like a prequel to all of Miles' adventures, but it was fantastic, and it kind of sold me on just trying more of her books. Then I started reading her fantasy stuff, which a lot of people don't know about. I brought up that she wrote fantasy, and a friend in a book group was like, wait, I thought she only wrote Vorkosigan. What's funny about that is her fantasy is so good. I think she's probably the best living science fiction and fantasy writer. She's won a ton of Nebulas, she's won a ton of Hugos. Her science fiction series and her fantasy series have both won the Hugo Award for Best Series, which is just astounding. As much as I don't give a lot of credit to awards, when it comes to winning so many of them, you kind of have to pay attention. She grew up in Ohio, which will be relevant to one of her book series. I'll try and bring it up when I get to it. And she went to Ohio State University. She has spent now most of her life writing. So that's what we're going to focus on. And speaking of writing, let's talk about what makes her writing so special. She has very complex and believable characters. It's just on another level. Even her minor characters. None of the people in these books feel like NPCs. They feel like they have their own motivations and depth and their own arcs. They are going through their lives in the same way that these main characters are going through their lives. And I think it's just so great that every character on the page feels like a real person. You can't say the same for a lot of writers, and it's just something different about her writing. She does such an amazing job of kind of blending genres. You see that in the Vorkosigan series, like just in Shards of Honor. The series is supposed to be like space opera or military science fiction, but even that one, there's like a little romance subplot going on. There's just a lot of depth to every book she writes, which is another one of the kind of special things about her writing. Is her books are not only fun adventures, but very thought-provoking, and there is a lot of subtext to her books. And she has a heavy emphasis on theme, but in a way that if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it, but it's not going to take away from the book if you miss it. Her writing is just so good and so fun that it ultimately doesn't matter, which I think is one of the things I like most about her writing. I really like a strong theme in a book, but I'm not there for the strong theme. I'm there to be entertained. And so when a book is fun, but has these layers to it that make it rewarding to reread and rewarding to just think about over and over again, I think that's what pushes you to the like God tier when it comes to writing science fiction and fantasy. Another thing that makes a God tier science fiction or fantasy writer is their world building without it becoming overwrought in their writing. Excessive exposition is fine if it's done well and, not often, but you don't have to worry about that with Bujold. Her world building is very intricate and has a lot of depth, but she's not jamming it down your throat. Another thing that's great about her, she trusts her readers. She has respect for you as a person with a brain, which is great because her world building is there and it's easy for you to suss out if you just take the time to think about it. But she's not going to spoon feed anything to you, and the plots of these books are so good that you don't need to be spoon fed what's going on. She's writing about people and her characters just feel so real And when I say her characters feel real, it's another great thing. Her long-term growth of a character and their relationships and kind of how they build their place in the world is on every page in every book. I've been following Penrick now for 7 books. He's aged 10 years. And in that 10 years, he has become a different person. He has become a better person in some ways. In others, maybe a little worse. And the same goes for Desdemona, his demon. And I will talk about that when I start describing the series. She has changed because he has changed her. And the reason he has changed her is another thing that we can go into about what makes her writing great, the themes. One of them is agency and kind of what makes a person a person. Demons are not considered people by a lot of the people in Penrick's world, but Penrick gave her a name, gave her a place in his life because she's already in his body, in his mind or spirit or whatever. And you can tell from the very first story that she has latched onto him in a way that she never did with any of her other vessels. It's because she's treated like a person. Some of the other themes are things like, does duty come before, like you being your own person, finding love, finding a place in the world? Do you follow your religion in Penrick's case, or your hierarchy because he's part of like the church? Another thing real quick, when it comes to the world building, there's just so much going on in these. It's so good. Every time we go somewhere new, we learn a little more about the world, and she's writing these as novellas, and somehow in the little amount of time that she has in these books, she's giving you so much. I just can't believe it. At this point, I feel like I'm rambling. I've already said, she respects the reader, character growth, great world building, emotional depth. Oh, I forgot her prose. Her prose is amazing. I was just working off a list I had. It's almost unparalleled in modern writers. Not only is her descriptions of where you are very tight, very efficient, they're beautiful. And one of the things that makes her writing so special is she has this ability to just make you feel something in a very short amount of time. She has these sentences that will live with me for the rest of my life. And it is just a way of her kind of putting you in these moments, and it's magnificent. Every single Penrick and Desdemona book so far, I have caught myself stopping and being overwhelmed with emotion from just these little things that she manages to put through the entire story. It's magnificent. But let's move on to talking about what she has written, because it is a lot. Get on the old bibliography. So most importantly is the Vorkosigan Saga. There's like 18 or 19 books. The problem is when you go to look at it, there's like omnibus that are like 3 of them together. And then there's another omnibus that is like 2 novels and one of the short stories. Then there's another omnibus that's a collection of the short stories. So you're like, well, and one of them isn't in anything else or was only released as its own little thing. And it's like, okay, I don't know how many books are here. That was another reason I kind of almost abandoned this as a project, was because I can't nail down the exact amount. And I'm not a diehard completionist. I'm okay with kind of getting the vast majority and then just being done. And so, yeah, there's like 18-ish books in the Vorkosigan series, and most of them follow Miles Vorkosigan. And I don't want to go into anything about the Vorkosigan series, mostly because I don't really know beyond Shards of Honor. I read it knowing nothing about the series, and I absolutely loved it. I love how good her science fiction reads and just how great the world feels. And so that sold me. Other than knowing that Miles is the main character for almost all of these, like I really don't know much else. So I'm kind of wasting everyone's time right now talking about it, but I can just tell you, and what little of it I have read, it has been wonderful, and it sold me on her as an author. Now, what really sold me on her as an author is the world of the 5 gods, because I've read over half of the Penrick and Desdemona novellas, novels, novelettes, whatever they are, and they are outstanding. So the world of the 5 gods is her fantasy setting that has, you guessed it, 5 gods. Let me see if I can remember them all. There's the father, the mother, the daughter, I guess the son, and then the bastard. I think that's all 5 gods. I'm not sure. Penrick and Desdemona series follows the bastard. You are following Penrick, who is a priest in the Church of the Bastard, and occasionally he interacts with people from other branches of this like world. Everyone kind of worships all the gods. The 5 gods themselves kind of have a heavy influence on every culture, which is really cool. There are times where I'm like, I'm pretty sure these gods are real. Is it just one God? Is it not? I mean, that's kind of the thing about faith, is you have to believe. There are moments where Penrick has been essentially touched by a deity, or people around him have. And one of the sayings that goes through a lot of the books is basically, if you believe in the gods will believe in you, kind of thing. You get out what you put in. It's really cool. Seeing all these cultures built around the gods in different ways is really fun. The story of Penrick is, at 19 years old, Penrick was on his way to get married, and there was an accident on the side of the road, or like a medical emergency or something. A carriage is stopped and there's a woman on the ground and it looks like she's dying. Penric goes over to see if he can help. When he goes over to help, he sees that it is a priestess of the bastard, and essentially she dies. He gets possessed by a demon. He wakes up with people in his mind talking to him out of his mouth, and it goes on from there. He finds out he gets powers from them, and for the longest time people were worried that his demon was ascendant. And the way demons work is they're these beings of raw elemental power that just come into the world and possess something and use it as a vessel. Animals, but they try to get to humans, and whenever the vessel dies, they try to move on to the most powerful nearby vessel. Powerful being incredibly subjective. Are they physically strong? Are they mentally strong? I think in Desdemona's case, she was looking for people that were emotionally strong. And at one point, she did jump into a specific person just to not have to do what she'd been doing for the last 100 years. So that was cool. And ascendant means that the demon has taken control of the vessel completely, because usually it's a symbiotic relationship and not a parasitic one. But when the demon ascends, bad things happen. So the Church of the Bastard is the one that has all of these demons. I don't know if the other churches do. It hasn't gone into it. I guess maybe I'll find out as I explore more of this series, because when I mentioned all the 5 gods, the other ones follow a different member of this pantheon. I think initially the goal was to have like a collection of novels or novellas for each god. I don't think that's happened, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Feel like I'm rambling, but let's try to keep this ball rolling. Penric becomes a very smart person, very skilled in his abilities, but also very traumatized by the things that he's had to do as a vessel for this demon. Him and Desdemona have formed this amazing bond because he treats her like a person. One of the themes that you see a lot in the Penric and Desdemona series is personhood. Are these demons their own entity? Are they just copies of their previous vessels because they have all the memories? And like, do they change as they move from person to person? It's just wonderful. I can't describe what makes them so good. Not only are they cozy, they're funny, they're heartfelt. I mean, some of the most touching moments I've read in fantasy in the last few years has been in these novellas. That's the thing I've got to emphasize. These novellas have more depth and more quality than the majority of fantasy novels I've read lately. It's just on another level. She is damn near unparalleled in her ability to write this stuff. I just can't wrap my head around how she gets so much done in such a little package. Mira's Last Dance is so short. I mean, it's half the length of some of the other novellas in the series, which are already novellas, but it's one of the best ones. It's magnificent. I can give you a zero context description for that book, and you'll be like, what? And it's man in drag cures cancer, seduces a general, and saves his friends. And it's so good. I think it's one of my favorites in the series. The last few that I've read, Penric's Mission, which was outstanding, Mira's Last Dance, and The Prisoner of Lemnos are kind of like a Sidonian trilogy. They all take place in the same part of the world, because so far he's kind of jumped around a lot of places, but all 3 of these follow Penric in this area with the same cast of characters. I think you can pick it up as an omnibus. You can. Penric's Travels. It's amazing. That's the other thing is like these come in omnibus editions for the first 9, and I think there's like 12 or 13 now total. So hopefully the other ones will be put out in an omnibus. As I've been talking, I've had them popping up over here. I really love them. If you want to get into Lois McMaster Bujold's writing, I think this is a really good way to do it. Penric's Demon is a lot of fun. It's a short book, so the barrier to entry is very low, and you can experience her writing, because the first one came out in 2015. We're talking about 30 years into her writing career, which it's funny. I say it's nice to get into something she wrote later as she's mastered the craft, but Shards of Honor came out in 1986 and it is just as magnificent. So she started out writing darn near perfect and has just kept it up this entire time. Oh, the other thing in the world of the 5 gods is The Curse of Chalian, Paladin of Souls, and The Hallowed Hunt. Those are 3 like full-size novels. The Curse of Chalian, Bujold has said, was heavily inspired by medieval Spain. She was taking a college course just to kind of be a better person and learn. It heavily inspired it. I'm really looking forward to getting to the rest of those. I'm not sure how I'm going to read everything she's got. I'm really thinking I'm just going to do like one chunk at a time. So I'll do all of the World of the 5 Gods, and then I'll do all of another one. And then what I might do after that, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to save Vorkosigan for last, is the Sharing Knife series. So what little I know about the Sharing Knife series sounds amazing. One, it's 4 volumes. The series is complete. There was a short novel or long novella or whatever published about a decade after she finished the series that I will also read. The Sharing Knife is about a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, already sold, heavily inspired by rural Ohio where she grew up. And I'm like, holy crap, how can this get any better? Well, it's 18th century technology without guns. Okay, I'd like the guns, but we don't need the guns to have a good time. The premise is, after the fall of this magical civilization, the survivors in this story have a responsibility where they maintain the borders on the Great Lake, like as in the Great Lakes. That's where the civilization was that collapsed. Well, these like monsters or something come out of the water and they possess people. They're like a malice and they feed on life force, which I'm reading from the Wikipedia, includes not only the internal order of living beings, but also the structural integrity of all matter, the emergent properties of form and function. They can mold like man-like agents out of wild animals called mudmen, and they can absorb the knowledge and skills of the humans that it kills. So this group called the Lake Walkers, they're like a hunter-gatherer, warrior, nomad group, and they patrol this lake and they hunt these monsters. And so like that's pretty much all I know, except for one little tidbit. The sharing knife is a knife made out of the bones of the previous hunters with their spirit imbued into it, and they use that to deal with the monsters. Holy crap, so freaking cool. That's all I needed to know. I was already sold on it, and then recently I found 3 of the 4 in one place, so I picked them up and then I got the 4th one on eBay. Those will be in a book haul that'll be coming out after this video, so check that out. And let's move on to the rest of her bibliography. She also has a few standalones. She has the Spirit Ring, which was published in 1993 as a standalone fantasy book, and it sounds cool. It's set in a fictional Italian style like city-state, and you follow this 15-year-old who's the daughter of a master metalworker and magician, and it just goes from there. I don't want to spoil too much of it. Another quick thing is every time I look at one of her books, I think, oh wow, that book's not very long. None of them are very long. I don't know if she's written a book over 500 pages in her career, which is just magnificent. Thank you so much for not only being a very efficient writer, but also leaning into that efficiency and creating these stories that don't take weeks to read. I appreciate that so much, and it feels like the entire book industry is kind of moving back to that. I think that if you write more than 100,000 words now, you're just getting rejected outright. It's really cool to see a writer who has been around since the 80s, who has gone through the short but sweet phase of the 1980s with like book club books and just kind of the way things were done back then, to the ginormous tome age of the 90s and the early 2000s up into the 2010s, and back to the bro, you got to keep your books a little shorter. We need more of them on the shelf, and I'm tired of using so much paper age that we have now. And she has been consistent the entire time. The Spirit Ring is like 367 pages, and if we look at another one of her books, let's just look at Legacy, which is book 3 in the Sharing Knife series, 377 pages. Oh, well, maybe we should move backwards to her stuff she wrote in the 80s. Shards of Honor, boom, 320 pages. We're talking about almost everything she writes is under 400 pages. I know I'm harping on this a lot, but when I pick up a book that is the size of 3 or 4 normal books, it just kind of bothers me. And depending on the writer, I don't want to be there that long. Like Wind and Truth is ginormous. I loved every second of it, and I appreciate how long it was. But then I pick up a book from another author like Ken Follett. When I was trying to read the 3rd book in Ken Follett's Century Trilogy, I was just like, I ain't got time for this. This is the longest of the 3, and I am not having a good time a third of the way through it. So I'm like, I'm out. And what's crazy is a third of the way through it is an entire novel from a lot of other people. But I'll stop with this digression rant about book length. Let's get back to what really matters, which is Bujold's writing. I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but you know, she's got about 38 books-ish, and she's got some nonfiction. The one that I really care about is called Sidelines, Talks, and Essays, which is just essays from her and talks. And I think that's it. I'm really looking forward to this project, and I'm really looking forward to all of you going on this journey with me. I'm going to try to be a little better this year about how I cover the books. Like you'll see me review them in the wrap-ups, and I'm also going to do separate videos for each setting. So I will do a Sharing Knife video, I will do a World of the Five Gods video, and I will do a Vorkosigan video. With Vorkosigan, I'll probably tier rank them because there's a lot of them, and tier rankings are fun. It's a great way to kind of get the mind working to talk about the writing. Let me know in the comments if any of you have read Lois McMaster Bujold and what you think of her writing and what you think I will like the most out of all these books. That's it. Thanks for watching. And with that, I'll see you next time.